For a while now, Resident Evil has reacted to itself. The constant trend for the franchise has been trying to recreate the successes that it's found. That doesn't stop it from reinventing itself quite often. Resident Evil 4 and 7 in particular revolutionized the series and changed the perspective of the franchise, sometimes literally. But games like Village and Resident Evil 6 were mostly attempting to react to the series' successes. RE9 feels like one of the first games in the series that is looking backward, not just at the latest successful entry in the series, but every single one. In many ways, this game is a beautiful and sometimes sappy love letter to the franchise, the pretty parts and the ugly ones. It is a requiem for Resident Evil itself. It is maybe the most Resident Evil a game has ever been, and I mean that in 100 different ways. I absolutely loved this game. Falling in love with the franchise last year, I feel like Requiem came out at the perfect time for me. In this video, I'll be giving a brief review of Resident Evil Requiem. I will not include spoilers in this video and will attempt to only include footage from the first few hours or so, but I would recommend that if you're worried about getting anything spoiled from the beginning of the game, just don't watch this video and go play Requiem, because it's out already, doofus. I'm also going to assume that if it's been in the trailers, you've seen it. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe as it really helps me out, and check out my Patreon in the description below. I review movie adaptations of video games over there and have reviewed every Resident Evil movie. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I'd like to talk about Resident Evil Requiem. Resident Evil Requiem is split into two parts, the sections where you control Leon and the sections where you control Grace. By default, Grace's sections are showcased in first person, and Leon's sections are showcased in third person. The game asks you if you would like to change this, but I would highly recommend not changing it. It's integral to the game design, and at least getting in one playthrough with these perspectives is best in my opinion. This is because, for the most part, Grace's sections are heavily designed around horror, and Leon's are heavily designed around action. Of course, horror bleeds into Leon's sections, and action bleeds into Grace's from time to time, but for the most part, they're split in genre pretty evenly. This works far better than you think, and Grace's sections in particular are possibly the scariest thing the franchise has ever produced. I am not exaggerating when I say that RE9 has some of the scariest video game sequences that I've ever played. A large part of this is the intense atmosphere that it crafts. The soundtrack, the low light, the early game mechanics, the resource restriction, and the enemy design all contribute to making you feel more terrified with every passing second. There were moments where I just wanted to relax, where I was begging to see Leon's face again because I was scrambling for my life. This oppressive design makes Leon's sections feel like a breath of fresh air, a moment where you can enjoy the action, a reward for your troubles. One of the best things that this game does, in particular with Grace's sections, are make general zombies feel powerful again. Grace can't take them out easily. They take a ton of shots, and you have to be okay with the fact that you're going to have to just stealth by some and leave them behind. Introduce even more powerful enemies to this equation, and they become essentially untouchable. The game warps itself around the concept that you are powerless. Grace isn't Leon. She isn't a secret operative that's had years of experience fighting against bioterrorist organizations. Therefore, she can't dispense with a house full of infected. She has to take this slow. She has to use this environment to her advantage. She has to conserve her resources a lot. The game often waits for you to get comfortable as well. When the cockiness exudes from your character is the moment that you stumble into an encounter unprepared. You lose incredibly useful healing items and ammo. Leon's sections are sort of the opposite. Now, we certainly don't have as much ammo as Chris in the final sections of Village, but we don't really have to worry about it too much. Leon is also much more focused on actually taking out as many foes as he can. We have much better weapons, a better pistol, shotgun, rifle, etc. Leon can use his signature roundhouse kick to disable foes, and use his hatchet as an infinite knife that can be resharpened to explode zombie heads. While Leon's sections are the opposite of Grace, they are very successful at what they're trying to do: build tension, reveal story beats, and be satisfying and fun. The gameplay feels fantastic, mostly an extension of the Resident Evil 4 remake system. We have more ammo, we pack more of a punch, and the game meets us with more powerful enemies to compensate. We're often fighting bosses with Leon and taking out more zombies. Juxtaposing these two styles back and forth, Requiem properly conveys the dichotomy of the Resident Evil series as a whole. A video game franchise that has always oscillated between terrifying monsters hiding around the corner and goofy schlock. Grace is having a straight-up vocal panic attack in the dark, and Leon is parrying chainsaws and roundhouse kicking zombies in the head.
That went well.
Because of this design choice, this means that Requiem has to constantly play a balancing act, properly placing pieces on these scales to ensure that one isn't represented more than the other, and it does this so well. The game at the end left me wanting more of Grace's sections, but also more of Leon's sections. Neither of them were a chore for me. I dreaded Grace's sections, but that's because it was the intended emotion. The progression feels fantastic as well. By the end of the game, I felt genuinely powerful and more confident in my abilities, which I think was also the intended effect. At a certain point in the game, Grace's sections weren't terrifying me like they had before. I knew I had the ability to handle these situations, and with Leon, I became an effective operator, a killing machine, a roundhouse kicking badass. And I'll be a bit more vague about this point because listing off examples would spoil too many decisions in the second half of the game, but Requiem is a total love letter to the Resident Evil franchise. I don't just mean this narratively either. All of the gameplay decisions are pulling little pieces from every single entry in the series. A lot of the design of the care house feels like it's taking parts from Resident Evil 1 and 2, but in turn, Grace's perspective in the heavy horror design feels like Resident Evil 7. Some of the goofier moments feel like Resident Evil 5 and 6. There are slight allusions and nods to Village, and of course, playing as Leon in the third person with a good system at its back feels like Resident Evil 4. You could even make the case that swapping back and forth between characters feels like Resident Evil 0. There are a million examples here, and you'll see for yourself what I mean when you play the game, but if Resident Evil is a virus, then it has infected Requiem itself. The DNA of the franchise feels present here, and I don't just mean that in the hallmarks, the small puzzles and collecting objects or kicking boxes for ammo. I mean that in its core, in its soul. This game feels like every single Resident Evil game made previous has informed it. It feels heavily informed by the remakes as well. It feels like Capcom has been running biological experiments with each one of the remakes, refining their gameplay like a weapon until it's ready to be unleashed on a mainline entry. Requiem is the fruition of everything that Capcom has been doing with the mainline entries and the remakes in the past few years. That doesn't mean that you need to have played every Resident Evil game to understand it, but if you're a fan of the franchise, then there will certainly be more here for you than someone who is starting with this entry. Requiem places us in the shoes of two characters, one new and one old. The first is Grace Ashcroft, a young girl who works for the FBI as a technical analyst, and she's sent to investigate some murders at the Wrenwood Hotel. We follow Grace as she tries to escape an unfamiliar new location, trying to make up for her perceived past failures. Leon Kennedy is the other character. His last appearance having been in Resident Evil 6, Leon is quite a bit older now. He's investigating some murders as well, suspicious killings of Raccoon City survivors. He heads to the Wrenwood Hotel to investigate the same murders as Grace and quickly ends up wrapped in a larger investigation that involves helping the girl out of trouble. I really enjoyed the story as a whole. The whole thing throws you for a loop, weaving twists and turns at every corner, none that I'd like to spoil in this video here. I was pretty cocky a few hours in though, and a bit disappointed that I knew where this train was taking me. When we zipped past the station though and kept running full speed down the tracks, I realized I was wholly wrong. Grace is probably my favorite part about the narrative though, a younger woman characterized as having quite a lot of anxiety and trauma around events that she endured 8 years ago. Grace develops a quick and constant stammer, unable to control her emotions in this understandably terrifying situation. She feels genuine, like someone not adapted to these circumstances. Her terror only adds to the fear that the player experiences when playing the game. We can hear her sharp breaths and panic while creeping around in the dark. The mind naturally adapts to its environment, taking on the anxious nature of the character we're attuned to. And Grace has goals and motivations. She feels responsible for her past. It's something she wants to run from. Only when she is forced to look back and face it does her journey begin. Leon's story is similar, a man who has some regrets that he'd like to make up for. Leon is characterized far more than I expected him to be, though. He feels like he's the face of Resident Evil, but hasn't always been the main character like Chris has. Leon is allowed to feel like the main character in Requiem, and there's some particularly interesting moments that developed him in a way I really enjoyed. That's not to say that there isn't a ton of goofy schlock, though. Leon's one-liners are back in this entry, and just because he feels guilt doesn't mean he can't look cool while being guilty. The story does attempt to wrap a ton of things into one, though. Before the game released, I had heard news that the team was attempting to do this, to make this game a sort of capstone for a specific era of the series. And I think it does that surprisingly well. I wasn't confident Capcom could pull it off, especially after taking on wider stories like RE6 and mostly failing, but they did a really good job. And they even get oddly sappy at certain points. It's cathartic. The narrative kept me intrigued the entire time though, and I was in it for the long haul. I didn't really know what was going to happen until the end either. And there were so many points where I thought the game just might be finished, but it kept going. Not in a way that drags, but in a way that felt fully realized and inspired. I could say a lot about Requiem, and I probably will make a much longer and more comprehensive review at a later date once people have had the chance to play the game, but it's truly fantastic. Sometimes franchises want to move on from their past. They want to forget the things that they've done in the interest of grasping at a new trend. Resident Evil has done this before. Sometimes it's failed, sometimes it's worked out, but Requiem is trying something else. It's taking a look at the series and realizing that this game wouldn't be possible without every Resident Evil game before it. It recognizes the fact that it is a video game that is part of a wider legacy. This is a game that is in love and obsessed with the past. The characters are focused on the past, attempting to face it or make amends for it. The narrative specifically returns to a very large and familiar location, and Requiem doesn't just reference previous games, it pays homage to them. It witnesses them and recognizes that they existed and they had a part in all of this. Requiem is like the smoothie that your friend tells you is really good, even though he describes it as chunky and containing pickles. Throw all of the Resident Evil games into a blender and that might not sound great, but trust me, you need to try it for yourself. I am very interested to see where the series goes after this, whether Capcom attempts to remake more titles or whether Resident Evil 10 goes in a completely different direction. Either way, I'll be there. Bye, Dad. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this brief review of Resident Evil Requiem. I ended up getting this video done very late because I didn't realize I got sent the code, and then I also was working on like 3 other videos, so I apologize if I'm a bit late to the party. Like I said though, I will be making a larger video about this game in the future because I honestly think there's a ton to examine here. I will have a ton of videos coming out in the next few days though if you want to see more, another short review on a new title coming out in the next week, and 2 videos on my second channel called Your Second Favorite. head over there and subscribe if you'd be so kind, because I'm trying to get that channel off the ground. Also, if you want to support the channel, head over to the Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks again. Bye, Dad.